Hello, and welcome to Thinking in Code, Video 1. In this video, we're just going to build a button, nothing too crazy, keeping it simple, but future videos will get more complex. Okay, first thing we're going to do here is we're going to make an object. I'm going to go ahead and name it button, just to kind of keep things simple. And I am going to drop this into the room right away, so I don't forget later. I generally do. Doesn't matter where I place it into the room. And then lastly, I'm going to make a draw event. Draw event, as the name suggests, is for drawing things. And I'll clear out the beginning text. So before we start actually writing code for this button, let's go ahead and just kind of think through what a button actually is in terms of software, and the pieces that are kind of required in order to make a button work. So I have a diagram of buttons that I grabbed from Google, just a random image. But we're just going to go through and I'm going to mark out the pieces that make up a button. So the first thing that kind of makes up the button is the XY coordinate, right, or like where the button is located on screen. For me, I use the top left of the button as my X and my Y coordinate. It just makes more sense as we go along with further pieces, like the next one, which is the width of the button, or how long it is. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to kind of fill out a black line for the width, and I'll also write down width. And then logically, right, in addition to the width, what else are we going to have? We're going to have the height of the button, or how tall the button is. Same thing, I'm going to mark it down and I'll write down the height. And then logically, I mean, after the X and the Y coordinate, the width and the height, the last thing is the text, or what's in the center, right? The word submit. Okay, so now that we're back in the engine, we're going to go ahead and get started on programming this button. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write some comments here of the variables we're going to be using that were in the image. For instance, the X, the Y, the width, the height, and of course the text that is in the center of our button. So then after jotting down the variables, I'm actually going to make the variables, starting with the word var, which makes it a temporary local variable. I can't use a lowercase x because it's actually a built-in variable, so I'm going to use an uppercase X and a Y. And then the values ultimately don't matter because we can always adjust them later to get the button to the size that we want. We just need a value to start with. And the fun one is going to be the text. That's obviously the word that is inside of our button. I'm just going to put the word button for now. Nothing really special. We can always change it later. And that goes for all these variables. Okay, we're going to get started coding now. The function we're going to use is draw rectangle. At the bottom, we can see that we need the x1, the y1, the x2, and the y2. But the question is, how do we get the x2 and the y2? The x1 and y1 are pretty easy. That's our x and our y. As for the x2 and the y2, well, we're going to hop back over to the button diagram here. I'm going to quickly grab a red pen. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mark where the x1 and the y1 are, which we already know, it's the top left of the box. But the x2 and the y2, that's the bottom right of the box. I'm going to quickly write that down so we can remember where the x2 and the y2 are. And then as for the question of how we actually calculate the x2 and the y2, it's simple math, sort of. We basically take the x and then we add on the width, and that gets us the x2. And I'm sure you can guess for the height, it's the same thing, but the y plus the height. And that's how we get the x2 and the y2. Okay, we're going to hop back over to the GameMaker, and we're going to put in that math now, x plus width, y plus height. The last question is, do we want the box to be an outline? I'm going to say false. We want to fill the rectangle for this. Now I could run the program, but before that, let's go ahead and set the color that we want the box to be. The function is draw set color, and I'm just going to say the color black for now. Not really going to think about it. And then let's run this program and see what we got here. We should have a black box. And look at that, we have a black box. Yep. Now I am going to change the height to 128. I'm going to make it smaller because I want it to be more of a rectangle than a box, right? Our buttons are rectangular, not boxes. And there we go. That changed it into something much more looking like a button. Okay, so now we're going to skip ahead. I'm going to set the color to white, and I'm going to use a new function, draw text. I'm just going to set the coordinate to the x and the y, and then obviously our variable text, which holds the word button. And when I launch the program now, we should have the word button inside of our box. And look at that, we certainly do. It's in the top left corner. I kind of want it in the center. How do we get it to the center? So it's going to be the next thing that we're going to take a look at. We're actually going to hop back to our image to do that. And I'll show you here how we're going to calculate the center. We already went over how to calculate the x2 and the y2, which is the bottom right of the box. And calculating the center is very similar. The difference is we just don't do the full width and height, we divide them by 2. And I'll start ahead with the width, so you add on the x plus the width, but divided by 2, and it's the same for the height. Divided by 2, and then I'll just kind of draw it here. That gives us the center of the width, the center of the height, and that ultimately gets us the center of the box. So back to GameMaker, we're going to do plus width divided by 2, plus height divided by 2. See if you guys caught the mistake that I made here. What the heck? Okay, so I mean it's in the width, but the height's wrong, and I accidentally added the width onto the y instead of the height. So I'm going to change it, rerun it, and there we go. We got in the center, but it's still kind of weird. Like, what is up with that? Well, it has something to do with what is called horizontal alignment and vertical alignment, and it's something that we need to think about when we draw text on screen. By default, the alignment is set to the top left of the text that we draw. And similar to our button, how we have the width and we have the height, and we can find the opposite corner, with our text, we want the alignment to be in the center. So that's what we're going to change next, is changing our alignment to the center of our text. And the functions that we're going to use is draw set h align for the horizontal and draw set v align for the vertical. And then the variables that we're going to put into the h align is fa center. You can think left, right, center. And then as for the vertical alignment, you can think top, middle, and bottom. We chose middle. And then we're going to go ahead and rerun our program again, and we should have the text centered in the middle of our button. And would you look at that? Perfectly centered in the middle. The next thing that we're going to work on is getting in, obviously, the second color to our button and making it look more like a button and not just a black box. And to do that, first we're going to go ahead and copy our code that made our black box, and we're going to go ahead and paste that underneath it. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change it from black to the color blue. So our button is blue. And let's go ahead, we're going to run the program, and we're going to see what we got here. So now we have a blue button, but there's really no black. And ideally we would want the black to be an outline to the button, right? Kind of like how I have drawn here, where there's a thickness to the black outline. This is currently 5 pixels. That's a little too thick, so we'll do something less than that. I'm thinking 2 pixels is good. We're going to go ahead and we're going to subtract 2 from the x and the y, and then we're going to add 2 onto the x2 and the y2. And then let's run the program again, and we're going to see what we got. Hey, there we go. We have an outline now. Now it's a little weird, the right and the bottom are 1 pixel, so I'm just going to add 3 instead of 2. And then we're going to run it again. And look at that. We have a button with a black outline of 2 pixels. Perfect. And lastly, what we're going to do is I'm going to change the draw rectangle function to draw round rectangle. And what that's going to do is it's going to add a kind of smoother corner to our button, similar to the Photoshop example. And there we go. We can see now that the button has these kind of smooth, rounded edges to it, and it just looks a lot nicer to this button. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just change the width and the height. I'm going to make it a lot smaller, because our button is a little just too big on screen for me. And there we go. Now I think it looks like a really good button. In terms of how it looks, there's no functionality to it. We can't click on it. It doesn't do anything, but it sure does look pretty nice. And that's the end of tutorial 1 here. Thanks for listening, guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys learned something. There's going to be a tutorial 2 coming, a bunch of tutorials after this. In the next one, we are going to make the button actually work. We can move our mouse over it. We'll click on it. All of the fun functionality to a button. And in general, that's what this tutorial series is going to be, is we're going to build kind of regular apps, not necessarily diving right into making games, because that is what everyone wants to do, but ultimately I think that starting from a base of kind of regular software engineering is the good way to go to actually teach a person on how to think in code. So if you guys like this video, remember to like, remember to subscribe. It all helps me very greatly. So thank you so much, guys.